A radical leftist federal judge showed just how crazy she was when she started comparing Trump's deportations of the Venezuelan gang members to that of the Nazis, claiming that the Nazis were treated better here in the U.S. during World War II under the Alien Enemies Act. Take a look at this insanity.
Your Honor, I think this court's decision in IM versus CBP is instructive on this.
Am I wrong about anything I just said, factually?
Your Honor, I think it's incorrect that they couldn't have gone into court as the 5 individual plaintiffs.
No, but the point here was that there were plane loads of people. I mean, it's a class action. There were plane loads of people. There were no procedures in place to notify people. Nazis got better treatment under the Alien Enemy Act than has happened here, where the proclamation required the promulgation of regulations, and they had hearing boards before people were removed. And yet here, there's nothing in there about hearing boards. There's no regulations, and nothing was adopted by the agency officials that were administering this. People weren't given notice. They weren't told where they were going. And they were given, those people on those planes on that Saturday had no opportunity to file habeas or any type of action to challenge the removal under the AEA. And like you've agreed that 2 of those airplanes, people were removed under the AEA.
Now, the judge went on to say that if the government says, we don't have to give process for that, then y'all could have picked me up on a Saturday and thrown me on a plane. She was suggesting that the administration could hypothetically claim that she was a member of Tren de Aragua and give her no chance to protest it, which of course is insane because all of these gang members are non-citizens, and that's why the Alien Enemies Act covers them. Now, 5 migrants flown to El Salvador have sued the Trump administration over the deportation effort and are being repped by the American Civil Liberties Union, or the ACLU, which defended Boasberg's temporary restraining order during the Monday's appeal hearing. Ensign for the Trump administration, in his opening argument, issued a broadside against Boasberg's second-guessing of the president's proclamation. The roughly 2-hour hearing also delved into the history of the government's use of the Alien Enemies Act, including its exercise by former President Harry Truman even after the end of World War II. The Alien Enemies Act, which has only been used 3 other times in U.S. history, including for the detention of Japanese Americans during World War II, gives a president broad powers over non-citizens in times of war. Trump has designated Tren de Aragua as a terrorist organization to justify, and rightly so, his use of that authority to bypass the usual channels for the deportation effort because the courts have been doing everything they can to slow walk the deportations. So of course he had to do the Alien Enemies Act. How else are we going to get mass deportation? We haven't even arrived there yet. And believe you me, if you think the left is hopping mad now, just you wait until we start deporting hundreds of thousands of people per month. This is why the court battle right now is so crucial between the left and the right. If they can stop Trump, if they can break the law and say the Alien Enemies Act no longer has the authority that it rightfully does, then you can hold up deportations indefinitely. The whole goal here is to outlast and outweight the Trump administration. Anyway, Ensign complained during the hearing that the intrusion upon the war powers and foreign policy powers of the president is utterly unprecedented. But the radical leftist judge countered by saying it is an unprecedented action as well. So of course there's no precedent for it because no president has ever used this statute this way, which isn't to say one way or the other whether it can be done, but simply to say that we are in unprecedented territory. She went on to say that the problem is not with the president's proclamation. It is with its implementation by lower-level executive officials. And she later explained that about Boasberg's restraining order, saying there's nothing there about enjoining his war or national security powers. Now, see, here's the problem with this judge. The Alien Enemies Act does not require the Trump administration to do any of these things that the judges are complaining about. This judge has no authority here other than to argue whether it was a valid invocation. That's it. Case closed, period. This idiot judge has no legal standing to do anything to thwart Trump's efforts to enforce the Alien Enemy Act. The law was specifically designed to be beyond her and Boasberg's authority. By law, these judges can only challenge whether or not the invocation of the Alien Enemies Act was valid or not. Full stop. They have no rights to talk about or try to argue about how it is enforced. This whole hearing is a farce. And it is something that we are all having to endure thanks to these radical leftist judges and a Supreme Court that is taking their sweet time reining in their radical leftist judges. Now, the New York Post goes on to write that at one point, Ensign compared Boasberg's order to a judge hypothetically directing a carrier group to move from the South China Sea to the Persian Gulf. And the judge said, hang on. Asserting a power to do that is not ordering ships to relocate in foreign waters, right? That is a straight-up judicial process that's allowed by the Supreme Court and circuit precedent. Now, while Millett served as the attack dog against Ensign, the DOJ lawyer got some backup from Judge Justin Walker, a Trump appointee who led most of the tough questions against the ACLU, who asked to the ACLU, could you have done everything in a district court that you did in this district court? He asked, diving into concerns about whether Boasberg had the proper jurisdiction to stop the flights. Perhaps, Your Honor, said the ACL lawyer, I'm giving him a voice here, but I don't think it was necessary. Now, Walker also asked why neither of the government nor the ACLU could state definitively whether all the migrants flown to El Salvador had only been subject to deportation claims under the Alien Enemies Act or whether they were subject to removal for other reasons. I don't know the answer to that, Gellert said. I suspect that most people, maybe all of them, are being detained on the immigration laws because they were in deportation proceedings, and the government is using the Alien Enemies Act to try and short-circuit that. The Trump-appointed judge, who at times leaned over to whisper with the nearly silent Judge Karen Henderson, appointed to the D.C. Circuit by former President George H.W. Bush, also noted the rare nature of Boasberg's order. I wonder if you point me to a district court restraining order or injunction that survived appeal that stopped an ongoing partially overseas national security operation, he asked the ACLU. At another point during arguments, Gellert stressed that Boasberg had not said whether he intends to, quote, try and bring people back who are already sent to El Salvador, but he is trying to get to the bottom of these facts. Even though he has no jurisdiction, he has not made a determination of whether his order was violated, much less what he would do as a remedy. Again, it's not his jurisdiction. It doesn't matter what little Judge Boasberg wants to do. He has no legal authority here, even though we're all acting as if he does right now. Now, Boasberg, the New York Post goes on to write, had restricted the Trump administration from flying planes filled with migrants allegedly linked to Tren de Aragua to El Salvador. However, 3 planes filled with some 260 migrants, or illegal aliens, arrived there hours after his March 15th ruling, which the administration contended came too late to turn the planes around. And Border Czar Tom Homan has waved off concerns that the migrants flown to El Salvador were not given sufficient due process, as well as accusations from individuals such as an attorney for deportee Jersey Reyes Barrios, that his client was erroneously removed due to a misunderstanding about his tattoo. He said, a lot of gang members don't have criminal histories. The bottom line is that a plane was full of people designated as terrorists, number 1. Number 2, every Venezuelan migrant on that flight was a TDA member based on numerous criminal investigations or intelligence reports and a lot of work by ICE officers. So that's the New York Post. And what a pile of garbage Judge Millett is. In fact, even Fox News analyst Gregg Jarrett couldn't hold back when they were discussing what the judge has to say today. Take a look at this.
Well, first of all, let's start with today's hearing. I wasn't surprised by the inflammatory, incendiary language by an appellate court judge. It was intentional. Anytime you can use the word Nazi and Trump in the same sentence, they think it's a win-win. But the truth is, the president has unchallenged authority under the Alien Enemies Act.
That's right.
The Supreme Court has reviewed it, as you pointed out, Sean, with Pam Bondi. The act precludes judicial review. Quote, courts may not pass judgment on the exercise of the president's discretion. And yet Boasberg, he doesn't care. He's defying the highest court in the land. He claims, well, it's a terrible attack on due process. No, it's not. Because under this singular law passed by Congress, an alien can be removed without a hearing. And yet the appellate court was so unbothered by any of that today. At least there was one judge who was on the right track. He questioned whether the D.C. court itself has jurisdiction. Guess what? They don't. The plaintiffs were in Texas when their petition was filed, and under the law, Only a federal court in Texas has jurisdiction, not Washington.
And that's the bottom line. We're talking about aliens. We're not talking about U.S. citizens. They don't have the rights under this law. They can be deported any time, as we are seeing. Now, the bottom line to all of this is this whole thing, this whole court cases, it's all a charade. And it's something that the Trump administration has to go through. It's either that or simply reject the judges and do what they will. But that's a political landmine that has a lot of risk to it. And so they're going to go through this process to get up to the Supreme Court. These judges and their illegal rulings and injunctions on how the AEA is used is wildly unconstitutional. It is wildly illegal, but they're doing it. These guys need to be purged. These judges like Millay and Boasberg, they need to be purged from the bench. Although, let's be honest here, that's next to impossible with the current way that the court protects their own. And so either the Supreme Court needs to step in and rein in these activist judges, or Congress will inevitably have to take matters into their own hands and change the rules for how to remove judges, which would be very bad for the courts long term, and I think would be a long-term negative. So it'll be much better for the Supreme Court to step in and tell these rogue judges to pound sand and to back off rather than letting Congress take the helm. And this cannot go on for much longer. You can't have the rule of law continually thwarted by rogue judges with no repercussions. Something, my friends, must be done.